Welcome to my Open Baffle active speaker video. I would like to thank a few partners that have made this possible. Fuzzy Audio for their contribution of incredible amplifiers. Sparkos Labs for their op-amps that made everything sound even better. And Kicker Audio for the remarkable sub they provided. Truly a thank you to these incredible companies and partners. Friends, welcome back to Andy's Rec Room. Today is a very exciting day because I'll be showing you guys my fully active Open Baffle system. We talked about it in the past sections of it, but today I'm going to go methodically through all the elements. It's going to be in two basic parts. The first part will be software, and behind me you can see some of the software that I'll be using. The second part will be hardware. It will be quite a bit shorter than the software section, but it's still very important. I'll be using some specific pieces today, like the MOTU Ultralight Mark V. So it will be very focused on how to get that unit working for our purpose and getting the sound out properly through all the multiple speaker systems. So we're going to start off with 5 elements of the software. The very basic setup, getting your system sound set up on your PC. Then we're going to move into the actual setup for the MOTU. And it is somewhat particular and you got to pay attention to it. The third part will be VB Banana. The banana is your core. It allows me to route the signals everywhere. I can use my interface as a preamp with multiple inputs. It's pretty incredible stuff. And so it's a hub. Everything goes into there and it gets routed out. The second stage, which is the most important part for the active system, and when I say second stage of sort of active software, because the other stages are just preparation. So the two main functioning stages, you get it into the VB Banana, then you shoot it into EKIO. Now what EKIO does, it allows me to do all the crossover work and equalization for an active system. This is the part that makes this feasible. Without EKIO, the system wouldn't work, period. So that's a very important part. Now, of course, you're gonna have to have a source. We'll discuss that later. But the EKIO component, once it gets the signal from Banana, it breaks it up. And I'm using 6 channels for my setup. I'll break it down as to why it's 6 channels. It's kind of a quirky system, but it really is working out really well. So it breaks it down with the channels, shoots it back into Banana, and then out the MOTU. And what I was saying is you have to have a source. I am using Amazon Music. It's, you got some really good high-res files there, but whatever tickles your giblets, just go for it. It doesn't matter what the source is. If you set up the system properly, whatever you're playing will use the in from Banana as its main exit point. So it's gonna go to there, and you're going to be fine once it's in Banana and working through that system. So it's somewhat of an intricate system, but once you see how it works and the flexibility, it's remarkable. And in terms of sound quality, you're staying in a digital domain all the way through. So once you're in, you carry all the way through to your interface and out the other side. And I'm also using a turntable. So analog inputs, no problem whatsoever. And again, once you're in the digital domain, you want to stay there. You don't want to keep bouncing back and forth from analog to digital. Get in, stay in, do everything you got to do, and then out the speakers. So this is going to be broken up into sections. So I'm going to stop here with the talk and head section, and we're going to move into some screenshots of how I set up the software. It's going to be fairly short. I'll try to keep it very simple because all the manufacturers and software companies have excellent tutorials and manuals. So I'm not going to go super deep into it. I'm going to go how I set up mine. I'll have links to the software, and on their sites you will find more detailed instructions. But in the meantime, I want to introduce you to a friend of mine. So guys, just hang on for a minute, and he's going to have something to say to you guys over here. Labdien, un kā jums iet? Mans draugs, sorry, I will move to English, please. My friend, Andres, he would ask you very kindly. He's super happy with you all. Many views, excellent reactions, so pleased. But he has to have more followers and, you know, maybe a few more likes. He'll be so appreciative. Again, I ask you very kindly, could you please watch more videos, like, follow? Yeah, that'd be very good. Okay, thank you very much. He come back in a minute now, okay? Goodbye. And we're back. Now we're going to look at the basic setup of how I use my active speaker system. There are a few elements here that are quite important, and some will be basically seasoned to taste according to what you like to do with your own projects. But let's start off at the very beginning. First of all, the first thing I would do is just switch your system into voice meter input. Now, of course, this is assuming you've installed your voice meter banana, your MOTU drivers, your EKIO, and whatever playback software you want to use. I'm using Amazon Music as my streaming system. So I'm not going to get too deep into the installation because every one of these packages has their own tutorials, added videos, super well supported online. So I'm going to just talk about how I integrated these elements into my system. So let's go back to the first thing over here. So what we have is we're going to choose voice meter input. Once you've installed it, that will be an option. The second thing you have to do, very basic of course, is you got to go over here and set up your MOTU control panel. First of all, set your sample rate to 192. This allows you to play at the highest possible rate. So you don't have to play your music at 192, but this gives you the option. The other parameters are basically default. Internal clock, the loopback function, which we're not going to look at today. But what you got to do down here, which I think is pretty important, you have to set your buffer, and right now it's the wrong size. So let's move that to 4096. And that gives you a bit of leeway in terms of, you know, if you're using large files, you don't want to get a bottleneck there. It's kind of like latency settings for music. If you're doing a heavy mix down, you want to have a nice buffer size. Same applies here. And in here, you'll notice it'll default to these options. I don't want any of the stuff checked off. So in here, the only thing I will leave on is sync windows, sample rate to device. That's it. So we've completed now the basic setup for the MOTU. And on the ultralight, it gives you a lot of flexibility and you're good to go. So now we can get some basic parameters set up on how the system will be working, sending sound to Voice Meter Banana. Now, Voice Meter Banana is a very, very interesting package. It's donationware, and a lot of people might think, oh, well, it's not audio file. It's simply, basically think of it as plumbing valves. All you're doing is redirecting your streams. You do have to be careful about buffer sizes and that, but applies to any DAW or any kind of system you'd be using. So in here, what you have to make sure that you're doing is sending the signal to this software. And if I go over here to my Amazon Music and I look at the settings, you'll see that voice meter input right up here has been selected because I selected it as my default audio device. So anything I'm playing is going to get chucked into here. So once we get into here, you'll notice this is voice meter input. So the signals from the system or my any other inputs that I'm using physically here, which we're going to look at in a second, will be routed to where I want it to go internally in the software. So let's just assume we're going to stick with Amazon Music. And we're chucking it into voice meter input. Now, voice meter input's got the signal. What is it going to do with it? Now, you notice I'm sending it out to, I'm just going to come in here. You got A3 and B2. Let's look at A3 first. What A3, if I click up here, is this is actually my Fuzzy DAC, my Q6, which will not really be part of this discussion, but just let you know why it's there. B2 is the one that's important. B2 sends this data over to the sort of core element of the active system, which is EKIO. So in EKIO, you have to build up what you want to do. So for instance, you have to choose how many inputs you want, how many outputs you want, and then you're going to work from there. So what I'm doing is basically I want to have a system that'll take a stereo input. So you can see I got my 2 channels right here, and eventually come out to right low, right high, left low, left high, and 2 subs. I'll explain why I have the 2 subs. It's because I have a dual coil sub. So this system here is the one that's absolutely critical. Now let's just jump over to routing. So we've got a stereo left, right coming in. So what I want to do is, for instance, the right channel, I want it to go to right high, right low, and then also to both sub channels. Same with the left. It's going to come in left low, left high, and then you got the 2 sub channels right there. So this way it's being sent properly to all the locations I want it to. Now, of course, at this point, it's just raw, it would be raw routing without any kind of functionality. But when you get into here, you'll notice if we go to right low, for instance, what you'd expect for an open baffle system is not what you're seeing. What you're seeing is actually a bunch of cuts, not boosts. There's tons of low end. The whole audio short circuit thing is like hyperbole to the max. Yeah, there's some cancellation. But look, you're going to hear demos afterwards. You'll hear what it sounds like. I'm crossing over the system at 50. This works. So that is the crossover for basically the 12 inches. Now, if you go to right high, you'll notice, again, I am not hyping anything. The drivers have a lot of high end. You don't need to add any of that. Tons of sparkle. I'm actually cutting some of the stuff which would be a bit strident to my ears. But again, the beauty of the system is make it sound how you want it, not how I want it. And of course, for the subs are quite interesting because what I'm doing is they're basically the same setup for both sub left and sub right. You'll notice just a simple roll off for now. I might work a little bit refining it because the system's fairly new, but this is working like a hot dang. Super clear, punchy sound. And the reason why I have 2 bass channels is dual coil, and I have 1 Fuzzy V3 with a big power supply per voice coil. It is extremely, extremely effective. So this is the basic system in terms of the software up to the point where I've crossed it over. Now, I've crossed it over. How does it get back in? Well, if I go to my settings, you can see what's happening here. So of course I have the same sample rate, and here's what's important. Voice meter, aux, virtual ASIO. Now we come back over here, and you'll notice this is the voice meter aux 1. So the 8 channels are coming back into here. Now where am I shooting those out of? A1. What is A1? A1 is the MOTU Gen 5. So I think you got a pretty good gist now of how we're getting the gazintas into the gazautas. So essentially, the 2 main components that are doing the heavy lifting here are my hub and then my EQ crossover software. So these 2 guys are the core elements. And again, don't be fooled by the fact this is donationware. This is incredibly powerful software. And I think you'll see more and more folks using it because this allows me to use this software as a preamp. So you'll notice over here, I'm going to try to zoom in as we edit. You'll see phono, and I got ASIO 7 and 8. The only reason it's 7 and 8 is I wanted the plugs in a certain location. They can be anything. As you see over here, I put these as ASIO 1 and 2, ASIO 3 and 4. So you have basically 3 stereo inputs, and it works just like a preamp. You even have basic EQ and stuff on it. It's remarkable. But the one thing you have to do, and this is important, when you get to set up those inputs, you have to go to your system settings. And here you can see I've routed input 1, which is this guy over here, is taking my ASIO 7 and 8, then 1 and 2, 3 and 4, and they show up as such. And one thing that can throw you for a loop too is once you get in here, you're going to go, oh my God, ASIO's gone. What happened? Don't worry, it's working. It threw me a little bit too, but it's actually totally fine. Once they're routed, the sound will come out of the proper hole. So This is the software section I wanted to talk about. I'm going to go into the hardware section after this. But so again, to clarify, set up voice meter input, and very important, do check it. Make sure that this is actually set up here, because if it defaults to the MOTU main outputs, it's going to be a very loud ooba shuba bumba, and you'll get shocked, horrified, potentially blow up gear. How do I know? Don't ask me. And that's a really important thing to remember. So always check where it's going. And before you fire up your amp, a simple way to check is with the volume down. Like, I mean, you'll hear it right now. I just want to give you a quick example. So you'll hear some music coming out. And you can see right here, I got 6 channels active. Coming into stereo, going over to EKIO, coming back here is 6 process channels. All right, friends, so this is the software component. Let's move on to the hardware section. All right, guys, you made it to the last leg of this video. Thank you for watching this far. Now we're going to look at some hardware. I'm going to have a little diagram pop up here. And it'll show the basic signal flow of the system. Very, very simple chart, but it'll give you an idea of what's going on. So we already looked at the software, so we know how the signal goes in, gets modified, and goes to the last stage, which is VB banana. Now, VB banana is going to shoot it out to something you need to play it back with. Behind me, you can see I got my wonderful ultralight Mark V, and it's an incredible interface. Now, in terms of interfaces, if you were to build one, the choices are kind of limited for good quality multi-channel that isn't insanely expensive. Topping used to have a beautiful one called the, I think it was a DM7, but they discontinued it. And that would have been a perfect choice for this setup. But having said that, I'm a huge fan of MOTU interfaces. I use them live. I mean, I started doing live processing for theater and big sound systems in 2005, believe it or not. So I was using computer plugins to process sound live back then. And they were fantastic. Back then, the internal clocks weren't great, so you know, you kind of had to use a big band word clock to kind of get everything to lock in. But once it was locked in, it was remarkably good for the period and very flexible. Now, what I was running the system with for the last couple of years primarily was one of these guys here. It was a MOTU M4. Now, this little guy, if you read the reviews, everybody seems to love it. And I got to tell you, the Sabre Dacs in here, the ESS Sabre Dacs are phenomenal. So what I did to kind of bump it up to a realistic 8-channel system, because it did for a little while, was I used one of these guys here for the sub. And this is a Prozor. It was like $20 DAC. And just to try it out, and it sounded good, but it would drift. Of course it's going to drift. You got, the clocks aren't synchronized. But to try it out, it worked, and you got a really good idea that, I'm onto something here. The H-frame sub is really, really good. So with this guy, I got confirmation, proof of concept that it works. And then very recently, I went out and said, hey, you know what? Let's just try a multi-channel system. So I went out and found this guy. This is a Mark I ultralight. Believe it or not, it's Firewire, and it still works in Windows 11. Yep, you can get it going. You can order up yourself a little card, and off you go. So this little guy here proved to be really, really nice. But to be fair, this is old tech. This is really, really old tech. The DACs, sound like from their period. They're basically smoother, kind of not quite as exciting. The clarity isn't there, but still really good. So if you want to get something cheap, grab one of these. They work. And they work very well. Be a very, very pleasant listening experience. But having said all that, I can be a picky bastard, so I got the Mark V, and man, it sounds good. Anyway, you can have demos here. You can decide for yourself if it sounds good or not. How's that? But to my ears, it sounds really, really, really nice. So we go into this wonderful DAC. Now, then the fun starts. We're getting 6 outputs, and I got to deal with these guys. So let's start at the very top of what I'm using for speakers. I started off with, I'm just going to grab this little speaker here. Give me a second. I had these little car speakers from the 1990s. I used to use them in theater for practicals, like for telephone rings and stuff. Stuff it in a prop and off you go, get some nice sound effects. But they were really robust and well built. I mean, they were made in Korea. They were a 4-ohm speaker. really nice. The only thing with these guys, is the only reason I changed them out is, I have them in one of my earlier demos if you want to check it out. They did sound a little bit fatiguing after extended listening. So while they were, I mean, ridiculously good for their period, and the fact that they were free and sitting around, I wanted to upgrade a little bit. So what you can see is I got these beautiful DS series speakers from Kicker. I ordered them up. I purchased these myself. And frankly, for the money for a pair, it's ridiculous. I'd used Kicker speakers in an open baffle configuration many years ago. We talked about in other videos for live performance, for space considerations. And honestly, it was just mind-blowing how good they were for the price. So I figured let's go with that. Because the whole idea with the system, with the whole idea of DIY and keeping it reasonable, let's go for something that people can afford. Look, you can spend $2,000, $10,000, whatever. Like, the sky's the limit for tweeters and sort of coaxial, more multi-range speakers. But these guys here are a coaxial, and they fit the bill perfectly. So that was the high end. Now, here is the most controversial element of the system. Even my friends thought I was crazy. I'm using Celestion 7080 guitar speakers. And again, why? I had one. Simple as that. I had one kicking around. Now, the logic was, it wasn't just a random stick it in and hope and pray to Jesus. You got to think what they're made for. They're made for varying applications, including open back guitar cabinets. So, I mean, it's a perfect fit for an open baffle speaker system. I said, yep, I'm going to use these guys. So I built one up. I tested it in a plywood plank, but I could hear the resonances still. So the eureka moment was when I suspended them. And I have that video up as well. So basically, I took one of my camera tripods, suspended the speakers, and went, I mean, it wasn't perfect, far from it. But again, proof of concept was there. So I bought one more of these. I found it used. And again, if you want to build it, I'm going to have a complete item list at the end with, you know, potential pricing, depends where you live. And you can look and say, hey, do I want to build one or not? So you got sort of the high end covered all the way down to 1 kilohertz. And then these guys go from 1 kilohertz and I run them down to 50. And again, this is where we're going to talk a little bit about the whole idea of audio short circuit. Look, we understand waves will cancel each other out. There's no discussion there. But does it work? Of course it works. Back in the day, if any of you are theater people, Martin Levan used to use an array of tannoy, large tannoys in a frame, open baffle, no frames, for the vocal chain, because he felt it gave more clarity to the voice. Now, to be honest, it's not my cup of tea. It doesn't have enough kick or projection for live use. The space is simply too big for my taste. Did it work? Sure, obviously. The guy's a millionaire. People love the shows. So again, you got to kind of, like I mentioned earlier, season to taste. For me, this kind of system works in a smaller space, not an arena. And it's kind of like ribbon tweeters. They're amazing. But God forbid, I had one guy, he wanted to use them to replace the speaker in a UPA, a Meyer UPA. And I was like, okay, man, okay, just whatever, just do it. Of course it crashed and burned. It's not designed for that. It's not a horn. It doesn't have the projection. So again, different horses for different tracks. So these guys work. And it took a lot of time to tune it, to be honest, because these guys, the 7080s, get ultra beamy as they go up in frequency. So I had to find a sweet spot between the two. So that was that. And then I played it for a while as a 2-channel system per speaker, the highs and lows. And man, I was super impressed. But I figured, you know what? I'd like to get some more low frequency stuff going on. So what I did was I reached out to Kicker, and they were awesome. They sent me the Comp Q15 dual voice coil. Now, the reason why I wanted to do dual voice coil was at the time I had an old Denon kicking around, so I could easily use 1 channel per voice coil, and it worked really well. But I gotta say, I'll cover this in a second. When I moved to the new amplifiers, holy, it's transparent. It doesn't have that big sort of fake sub kind of flappy farty sound. It's nice, tight, and it carries right down musically from the higher frequencies. So that's the sub. Now, to power this system, I'm using obviously the Fozzy amplifiers I've spoken about before. And man, I gotta say, these things are remarkable. The build quality is fantastic, and they complement this particular speaker setup really, really well. Because if you go back in the food chain, you got the ESS Sabre Dacs, which are bright, very transparent. You got a Class D amplifier, which leans towards bright, and transparent. Now, how did we reconcile all that? We get into Sparkos now. Sparkos op amps, and again, you're going to get into discussions about you can't hear it. I've actually measured it. I got a cheap ass scope for another project, stuck it in there. Of course the waveforms are different, for God's sakes. You know, these guys are measuring in their multi-million-dollar meters and stuff. It's kind of like, just stick it in an oscilloscope. The waves are different. They sound different. Now, whether you like it or not, that's totally up to you, but they are different. Now, that gave me a really, really silky top end and beautiful, beautiful lows for the 12-inch speakers. So that combination smoothed out what could have been a little bit strident system. If you took the stock amps and you put it in a very bright speaker, it might be not what you're looking for. But in this combination, for my taste, and I always have to emphasize, this is where we do get into taste. I love it. I can listen to it for hours. It gives a beautiful 3D stage and great width. And of course, with open baffle, it's psychoacoustics. Of course, I mean, some of it's bouncing off the wall and coming out. So you're getting, you know, the amps are working really well. And the space is working with the amps really well. So that's where you get the synergy. So we've covered the Dacs. We've covered the speakers. We've covered the amps. Now, one last thing I'm going to touch on is I'm not going to get into interconnect cables. I mean, that's just stupidity. I mean, look, any good studio rather is using Mogami, Belden, Canair. That's the music you're listening to. Is a $20,000 cable better? Pfft, who cares? At that point, you're listening for thermal noise. The music's already there. So the interconnects, whatever you want to work with. But if you're looking at the speakers, what I decided to do is, and speaker wire is important. Don't get me wrong. You have to have the right gauge and, you know, decent quality. Because each of these guys has to have 4 conductors. I had a eureka moment. I was at Home Depot and I went, let me check the cabling. Not the speaker cabling department, the sort of industrial, you know, big cable with a big rubber jacket department. And they had a 12 gauge, 4 conductor, pure copper, super high quality cable. It's not cheap. I didn't buy it because it's cheap. It's not cheap cable, but it gives me the multi-conductors. So I can run one cable to each little tower. Dead nut simple. And for the sub, recently I went and found 10 gauge 4 conductor, because remember, I'm running 2 amps on it and 1 to each coil. And it's remarkable. The way the new V3 amps are set up with the post feedback sensing for the right ohm balance and so forth, it's remarkable. It's remarkable. It's not an active servo. Don't get me wrong. It's not like an active system, but it does sense what's going on and adjusts accordingly. It's tight. The damping is fantastic. I mean, essentially you got a really, really good system. You know, and I'm comparing it. I go to shows. I check out what the other folks are putting out. And, you know, all I can tell you is if you want to try it, I'm going to have a list of all the equipment. I'm going to put up a few files for the 3D printed parts, and we can go from there. And by the way, what I use for the tower is an adjustable IKEA leg. And again, it works. And if people get into, there's resonances and all that kind of stuff, after I stop yapping, there's going to be a few demos coming up. You guys listen to it and tell me what you think. So I think I've covered everything in terms of overall setup. So you got the software we covered, you got the Dacs we covered, you got the major cabling covered, you got the different drivers that I'm using covered. And again, you will have the list. And when you add it up, the system's not free. It's not like, you know, $100 system. But what you're getting is something very unique, very different. And if anybody wants to get in touch, you can, you know, my website's linked in my user description. You can go there, check it out, send me an email if you want, and we can maybe discuss any kind of, you know, throw around some ideas. I might put up the files as well for Banana and EKIO, so you can have a look at what I did. But again, take that with a grain of salt. Your space might be different. Where you want to cross over the drivers may be different. You might try fancier drivers. Why not? Take everything in stride, but the system works, and at this point, I'm happy where it arrived. It's my listening system. I don't use it for mixing. It is strictly for pleasure. So anyways, guys, thank you for sticking around this long. What we're going to do now is the talking head section's over. You're safe. I'm going to switch over to a few selections of music, and I won't come back. But as my friend said, Mr. ApoPaLiPz, please follow please like. It really helps me out and I can get the channel going. And I will see you guys hopefully next week with some new videos. This one took a long time because I was waiting for the Mark V, and you can see the plastic on it still brand new. Got it about 2 weeks ago. Anyways, guys, thank you so much. Check out the sounds.
wish I could swim like dolphins can swim. Though nothing will keep us together, we can beat them forever and ever. How we can be heroes just for one day. How we can be heroes just for one day. I will be king, and you will be queen. Though nothing will drive us away, how we can be heroes just for one day. How we can be us just for one day. I can remember standing by the wall, and the guns shout above our heads, and we kiss as though nothing could fall. And the shame is on the other side. Oh, we can beat them forever and ever, and we can be heroes just for one day.